KJA Global Channel. The Political System in Me. Series 4, The Political System Across Every Sector of Society. Episode 45, Women and Gender Justice, Protection, Equality, and Access to Power. A nation can hide many injustices behind big words. It can speak of sovereignty while women are unsafe. Development while girls are denied education. Morality while domestic violence is normalized. Tradition while discrimination is protected. Unity while half the population is treated as secondary. The condition of women is the condition of the nation. Women are not a sector. Not a special group. Not a side chapter. This is where our question begins. Can women live as equal citizens in safety, law, work, property, participation, and power? Women are half the people. They are teachers of generations, builders of communities, pillars of local economies, caregivers, workers, organizers, leaders, and often the first responders in crisis. Yet across history, women have been forced to live inside political systems designed without them. When we say, the political system and me, the woman's daily life must stand at the center of truth. Because women experience politics with the body. The system reveal is gendered barriers, protection, and access to power. Gender justice is more than inclusion, it is equality in safety, law, work, property, and power. In plain language, the hidden mechanism is gendered barriers, protection, and access to power. Gender justice is not a request for symbolic recognition. It is the architecture of a society that refuses domination inside homes, workplaces, communities, and institutions. If a woman is not safe, she is not free. Even if rights are written in a constitution. Safety begins with prevention. Clear law. Public education. Ethical institutions. Safe transport. Secure workplaces. Responsive services. Protection is not simply more police. Protection is a coordinated system that makes violence harder and justice easier. That system may include healthcare, emergency support, shelters, legal aid, trained police, prosecutors, courts, social services, child protection, and safe complaint routes. Survivor-centered protection begins with dignity. Listen without blame. Protect confidentiality. Explain options. Avoid unnecessary repetition of trauma. And respect informed choice wherever law and immediate safety allow. When courts blame the victim, the system becomes part of the harm. Evidence standards must be fair and realistic. Abuse often occurs in private, without independent witnesses, and under patterns of coercion that are not visible in one incident. Institutions must examine testimony, medical evidence, digital records, prior threats, financial control, witness accounts, and patterns of conduct with professional care. But justice must also protect due process. Serious allegations require competent investigation, reliable evidence, impartial decision makers, and lawful review. Gender justice and fair process are not enemies. Both protect human dignity. Equality before the law requires more than identical words. A formally neutral rule may still create unequal effects when women face unequal access to money, documents, transport, education, time, safety, or legal representation. The law must therefore test both equal treatment and equal access. Property rights are a central example. Can women own land? Inherit property? Register a business? Control income? Access credit? Keep property after divorce or widowhood? If the answer depends on permission from a male relative, equality is incomplete. Work is another test. Women may face unequal pay, restricted occupations, pregnancy discrimination, harassment, unpaid care burdens, unsafe transport, and exclusion from promotion. The care economy holds nations together. Childcare, elder care, domestic work, and community care sustain the workforce and social life. Yet much of this work is unpaid, underpaid, invisible, or treated as a private obligation rather than a public economic reality. Gender-responsive policy asks who performs care, who loses income, who has time to participate, and whether public services distribute the burden fairly. Access to power is not achieved when women are present only as symbols. Presence matters. Influence matters more. Who sits at the table writes the rules. Gender justice means women can shape budgets, laws, institutions, peace processes, workplaces, local councils, public administration, and cultural norms. Barriers to leadership may be formal or informal. Legal exclusion. Party gatekeeping. Violence and harassment. Unequal campaign finance. Care responsibilities. Media stereotyping. And networks that treat power as male property. Representation must not require women to imitate domination in order to be accepted. Equal leadership means authority exercised with the same freedom, scrutiny, responsibility, and legitimacy available to others. Gender justice must also avoid stereotyping. Women are not one identical group. Age, disability, ethnicity, religion, language, region, income, migration, conflict, and family status can create different barriers and risks. Institutions should identify actual disadvantage without reducing people to assumptions. Gender equality also benefits men and boys. A society that rejects domination can free men from expectations of violence, emotional silence, dangerous work, and sole financial burden. Justice expands when dignity is not treated as a competition. In conflict and displacement, gendered risk often increases. Sexual violence, trafficking, forced marriage, economic dependency, missing documentation, and unsafe shelters can deepen vulnerability. Protection systems must operate during crisis, not disappear when institutions are under pressure. Peace and political transition also require women's participation. Agreements designed without women may ignore safety, care, land, livelihoods, displacement, and community recovery. A federal democracy must protect equal rights across regions. Federalism cannot mean different levels of dignity. Regional autonomy can respect culture and local decision-making. But common constitutional rights must protect women from discrimination, violence, and exclusion everywhere. To understand women and gender justice, follow the rights chain. Right or legitimate interest, law or constitutional rule, responsible institution, complaint or review, hearing and evidence, remedy, enforcement. Right or legitimate interest asks what human claim is at stake. Safety, equality, property, work, education, health, participation, privacy, or political voice. Law or constitutional rule asks where the right, prohibition, duty, and standard are defined. Responsible institution asks which police unit, court, ministry, employer, school, hospital, local authority, commission, or service provider must act. Complaint or review asks where a person can report violence, discrimination, denial of property, workplace abuse, or exclusion from public power. Hearing and evidence ask what records exist, who listens, whether representation is available, and whether the survivor or complainant can participate safely. Remedy asks what can repair the harm. Protection, treatment, compensation, reinstatement, property restoration, lawful sanction, service access, or policy correction. Enforcement asks who makes the remedy real and what happens if the responsible institution refuses. A broken outcome may begin far upstream. The visible harm may be violence, lost property, denied work, unsafe services, exclusion from leadership, or a complaint dismissed without reason. But the deeper failure may be discriminatory law, an unfunded service, hidden records, weak investigation, captured oversight, retaliation, or a remedy that exists only on paper. The chain prevents us from reducing gender injustice to one offender, one family, or one official. It identifies where law, capacity, evidence, protection, oversight, remedy, or enforcement stopped working. When citizens and professionals locate that break, criticism becomes more accurate and reform becomes more practical. For this episode, the principal mechanism is gendered barriers, protection, and access to power. The production graphic must make every link readable on a phone screen and label country-specific or proposed arrangements honestly. Under dictatorship, gender justice is shaped primarily by concentrated command. Information is restricted, institutions answer upward, violence may be hidden, independent organizing constrained, and challenge may carry personal risk. Some authoritarian systems display women symbolically while denying independent power, lawful remedy, and freedom of association. In a fragile democracy, formal equality may exist while patronage, corruption, weak services, discriminatory practice, political violence, or poor enforcement makes protection inconsistent. Laws may improve before institutions can deliver. Complaint routes may exist but remain unsafe. Representation may increase without real influence. In a functioning federal democracy, authority is distributed, common rights remain enforceable, and courts, legislatures, commissions, local governments, services, media, civil society, and citizens contest gendered power. Elections or federal language do not substitute for functioning safeguards. The viewer should compare who decides, how authority was obtained, whether records are public, whether affected people participate, and whether survivor-centered services and remedy exist in practice. The constructive question is not merely what values we declare, but what institutions make gender justice reliable. The minimum guardrails are 1. Equal protection and anti-discrimination. Law and policy should prohibit unequal treatment in education, work, property, services, public office, family life, and access to justice. 2. Prevention and response to gender-based violence. Institutions need prevention, emergency protection, trained investigation, healthcare, shelters, legal aid, evidence standards, and coordinated case management. 3. Equal participation and access to power. Parties, institutions, workplaces, peace processes, and public bodies should remove barriers to meaningful leadership, representation, and decision-making. 4. Economic and social equality measures. Property, inheritance, credit, pay, childcare, education, health, transport, and social protection should expand real independence and opportunity. 5. Survivor-centered services and remedy. People need safe reporting, confidentiality, informed choice, legal support, independent review, protection from retaliation, and enforceable correction. These safeguards work as a system. Equality law without services can remain symbolic. Protection without evidence and due process can fail both justice and trust. Representation without influence becomes decoration. Participation without safety can expose women to retaliation. And remedy without enforcement does not repair harm. Global relevance. Across political labels, ask who is safe, who owns property, who receives opportunity, who shapes decisions, what records exist, and whether correction is real. Myanmar relevance. Use ordinary lived experience only where it clarifies the mechanism. Do not treat one authority, organization, community, women's group, ethnic group, or proposed arrangement as the whole country. Separate existing institutions from interim systems, local practices, political commitments, customary arrangements, and aspirational federal designs. Here is the civic practice for this episode. See and ask. Ask whether the law and institutions near you protect survivors or re-injure them. Notice barriers in safety, property, work, services, representation, and leadership. Verify. Examine equality law, safety and service data, property and labor rules, representation evidence, complaint routes, safeguarding standards, and available remedies. ACT. Apply a gender impact checklist to one service, policy, budget, or rule. Ask who benefits, who is excluded, what risk exists, what evidence is available, and which institution can correct the problem. Do not collect sensitive personal data or expose survivors. Review. Record whether you can name the responsible institution, the evidence, the safeguard or remedy, and one safe next step. Use only lawful, proportionate steps and do not convert the exercise into a public accusation. Gender justice is not a secondary reform. It is foundational reform. A political system that permits domination in daily life will eventually permit domination in national life. But a political system that protects women's dignity builds a culture capable of defending democracy itself. Not as protected dependents. Not as symbolic figures. But as equal founders of the nation's moral future. Protection without compromise. Equality without delay. Access to power without permission. That is gender justice. That is democratic completion. The principle to carry forward is this. Gender justice is more than inclusion, it is equality in safety, law, work, property, and power. Ask yourself, what part of gender justice and access to power have I treated as normal even though it should be visible, answerable, and correctable? Freedom survives when responsibility becomes habit. In the next episode, we continue with youth and future citizenship, education, jobs, and national continuity. Continue the playlist, use the worksheet, and keep the practice safe, truthful, and disciplined. The system shapes our lives. Our participation shapes the system. Subscribe. Learn. Participate. Shape the future. KJA Knowledge justifies authority.